The HOA's campaign against Thomas escalated faster than a muscle car from 0 to 60. Their board members, led by the imperious Karen Whitfield in her tennis whites and pearls, began conducting daily inspections of his property from the sidewalk. Smartphones raised like weapons as they documented every perceived violation. When Thomas presented evidence that his property wasn't under their jurisdiction, Karen's perfectly Botoxed forehead actually managed to wrinkle in disbelief. "Impossible," she declared, waving a perfectly manicured hand dismissively. "Everything within sight of Oak Ridge falls under our authority." The next morning, Thomas woke to find orange towing notices plastered across his vehicles, including his grandfather's pride and joy, a meticulously restored 1965 Mustang. Before he could stop them, a tow truck was already backing into his driveway, its operator looking nervously between his paperwork and Karen's triumphant smile from the sidewalk. Thomas's attorney, Maria Santos, could barely contain her glee as she reviewed the case. "They've given us everything we need on a silver platter," she announced, spreading photographs of the HOA's documented trespassing across her desk. Together, they crafted a response that would make any HOA board member's blood run cold. Thomas installed a state-of-the-art security system, complete with cameras that captured every angle of his property in 4K resolution. He erected professional signage warning that trespassers would be prosecuted and unauthorized tow companies would have their vehicles impounded. But his masterpiece was the massive banner he hung on his garage: "Private Property, not part of Oak Ridge HOA," in letters large enough to be read from the development's guardhouse. The HOA's lawyer, upon receiving their cease and desist letter backed by irrefutable property records, advised them to back down immediately. They ignored him. Oak Ridge's annual summer soiree was their most prestigious event, where residents showcased their luxury cars and designer outfits. This year, however, the event would be remembered for something entirely different. When guest parking overflowed into Thomas's conveniently located gravel lot, Karen saw her opportunity for revenge. She called her preferred towing company, assuring them she had full authority to remove the vehicles. What she didn't expect was Thomas's countermove. As the tow truck pulled in, it was met by two larger tow trucks from Thomas's contracted company, along with the local police and a news crew he tipped off. In a masterful display of karma, not only was the unauthorized tow truck impounded, but so were the illegally parked vehicles belonging to Karen and her fellow board members. The evening news captured it all: the HOA board's spluttering indignation, the towing company's embarrassed retreat, and Thomas calmly showing his property documents to the police. The final bill for the HOA included impound fees, legal costs, and a settlement for harassment that made Thomas's grandfather's legal fund seem prescient. These days, Thomas runs a thriving paid parking business during Oak Ridge events, charging premium rates that residents gladly pay, though Karen and her crew now notably park elsewhere. The lawyer's office felt unusually stifling that afternoon, as Thomas Chen shifted uncomfortably in his seat, surrounded by relatives he hadn't seen in years. His grandfather's passing 3 days ago had brought the family together, but not in the way the old man would have wanted. The air was thick with tension and barely concealed avarice as Mr. Patterson, the family attorney, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and began reading the will. "To my grandson, Thomas Chen," Mr. Patterson's voice cut through the silence, "I leave my entire vintage car collection, my tools, and my 5-acre property at 1247 Maple Grove Road, including all structures and business assets therein." The words hung in the air for a moment before the room erupted. "This is ridiculous." Thomas's Uncle Philip jumped to his feet, his face flushing red. "Dad promised me that property years ago. I've been waiting to develop it. Do you know what that land is worth now?" Aunt Margaret's carefully painted lips twisted into a sneer. "The boy hasn't even visited in 2 years. What does he know about running a restoration business?" But Thomas knew exactly why his grandfather had chosen him. Those 2 years away hadn't been by choice. He'd been completing his master's degree in mechanical engineering, sending regular letters to his grandfather about his studies and his dreams of continuing the family's legacy of bringing classic cars back to life. While his relatives saw dollar signs in the property's potential development value, Thomas saw the heritage his grandfather had built over 4 decades. The property stood as a defiant holdout against the encroaching waves of suburban sprawl. The Oak Ridge development had sprung up around it like mushrooms after rain, with its identical Mediterranean-style mansions and pristinely landscaped yards. His grandfather's land, with its massive gravel parking area and lovingly maintained workshop, represented everything the luxury development wasn't: authentic, practical, and rich with history. Moving in proved more challenging than Thomas anticipated. Each trip from his apartment with another load of boxes felt like crossing a border. The Oak Ridge security guard at the nearest entrance kept stopping him, despite his proof of residence at the independent property. The neighbors watched from behind their designer curtains as Thomas cleaned up the gravel lot, their disapproving glares burning into his back as he cleared away old parts and reorganized his grandfather's impeccably maintained tools. On the third day, Thomas's mailbox nearly burst with violation notices. Each one bore the Oak Ridge HOA's gold-embossed letterhead, complete with their pretentious fountain logo. He spread them across his grandfather's old workbench, reading them with increasing disbelief. Unauthorized commercial activity in a residential zone. Improper storage of vehicles visible from the street. Non-compliant landscaping affecting neighborhood aesthetic. Unapproved exterior paint color scheme. The final notice, printed in aggressive red ink that seemed to gleam under the workshop lights, pushed the absurdity to new heights. It demanded he cease operating a junkyard and comply with their parking regulations within 72 hours, or else face daily fines of $500. Thomas picked up a framed photo from the workbench, wiping away a thin layer of dust. It showed his grandfather standing proudly beside a perfectly restored 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air, his weathered face beaming with pride. "Don't worry, Gong Gong," he whispered to the image. "I won't let them destroy what you built."